And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's webinar titled Introduction to Essbase 21c with Glenn Schwartzberg. So if you are new to On24, just so you know, you can adjust the windows to where you can have either the speaker maximize or the presentation itself. Please be sure to drop any questions in the Q&A box, and we will be sure to allot a certain amount of time at the end of the webcast for Glenn to answer those questions. So Glenn, go ahead and take it away.
Why, thank you, Brianna. For those of you who don't know me, I am Glenn Schwartzberg. I'm a architect for Argano. I have been doing Essbase since about 1992, and I'm an Oracle ACE director, which really means that I get to work with the Oracle development team on features and functionality. And I go out and I evangelize the products. I do things like webcasts and speak at conferences and just basically have a fun time doing it. So today we are going to talk about Essbase 21c. And I've done this webcast a couple of times. I did it for the Kscope conference, and I did it one other time as an Argano InterRel webcast. So you may have seen it. I am going to be flying without a net today. 90% of what I'm going to be doing is going to be live demo. So wish me luck. And I'm also at a disadvantage today because I'm actually not at my normal computer. I'm off-site somewhere else due to some things happening. So I only have one monitor, and it's kind of weird for me today. So it's going to be kind of a fun trip today. So we will go ahead and get started. And so I'm actually just looking for the Q&A window. There it is. Okay. So a little bit about Argano InterRel, in that we've been doing Essbase and EPM for about 25 years now. We have 3 Oracle ACE directors. We are now part of a much bigger organization, Argano. So in addition to just helping with your EPM and analytics, like InterRel has done for years upon years, we can now help across the full breadth of products. Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, whatever it is that you need, we have joiners that can help you with that. That's enough of an advertisement. Most of you know us and love us already, so I'm not going to talk much more about that. So let's talk about Essbase itself. And I told you I've been doing it since 1992, when it was actually a company called Arbor Software, and we were in versions 3 to about version 5. And it was basically ran on a small server. It originally ran on OS2. And to install it, it was very easy. You basically put in a couple of disks, and you said, yes, 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 and it was installed. We got to System 9, and they made it extremely complicated because they included all sorts of other products. And then in 2008, Oracle bought Hyperion Software, which had actually merged with Arbor Software back in 1998. And somewhere around 2017, April 1st, as a matter of fact, they launched OAC Essbase. And until that time, all of that was considered to be part of Hyperion and EPM. When they launched OAC, which stood for Oracle Analytics Cloud, they moved Essbase from being part of the EPM group or the Hyperion group into the analytics group, because they said, well, Essbase really is an analytic engine, so it belongs with analytics. And so that it was sitting there for a while, and the first version it was a customer managed one where the users had to go in and do their own upgrades and all of that. Then as part of the analytics group, they said, well, we're going to make it more of a SaaS product where we'll do the maintenance of it. And so somewhere around the middle of 2017, they made it a SaaS product. But then around 2019, the 19c, they said, well, the customers are complaining because we're managing it, so we're going to turn it back into a customer managed product. And it really isn't an analytics tool. It really is part of the database group. And so they moved Essbase to be part of the database group, where they had a lot of collaboration with the database developers to enhance and improve the product. So around 19C, it became part of the database group. And it was only on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, what's called OCI. Well, people were complaining and said, well, we need it to be able to run in our own data center, wherever that data center is, whether it be on-prem or in Azure Cloud or on AWS, we want to be able to run it ourselves. So they released Essbase 21c, and originally they released 21c in December of 2020, but nobody wanted a product that was associated with 2020, so they called it 21c. And originally the product was only on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and on Linux on what they call the independent install, which is in your own data center. And then around February or March of 2021, they actually released a Windows version of the independent install. So that's what we are today, and we've had a couple of patches to it. We are actually now on a version called 21.3.4, which is the latest patch. But Essbase has a bright future. So it's not just we're stuck with 21c, it's going up and further and getting bigger and better all of the time. So we really we are really in a great place where Essbase is growing and improving, and we can do more with it all of the time. So let's talk about the different flavors of Essbase. As I said, there really are two flavors of Essbase. The first one is what we call the independent install. And independent really is in whatever data center you want to install it on, whether it be your on-prem data center, AWS, Azure, or even on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. You could install it yourself on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And when you install the independent install, there are some features that you get, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. The second flavor of Essbase is on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, what I'll call the marketplace install. And that runs on an Oracle Compute instance running on a Linux server. The commonality between all of these is that you still have to do your own maintenance of the product. So you have to do your own patching and your own upgrades. Now, they have made it easy. the O-patching process that you do either on-prem, independent, or in marketplace is really the same. You download an O-patch from Oracle support and you apply it and you're ready to go. If you wanted to install a completely new version, you would basically download the new version for your independent installs. On Marketplace, you would basically stand up a new Essbase instance and you would install it and you would migrate your applications to that new instance. So really, those are the flavors. The independent, which is your on-prem Windows or Linux version, and your marketplace Linux version. But what are really the differences? Well, first, let's talk about security, because it really does make a difference on how you run things. If you're running it on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, you're going to be using what is called IDCS, Identity Management Cloud Service, or IAM, Identity and Access Management, depending on how recent you had installed your instance. Newer instances are getting IAM, and older versions are going to, that are already on IDCS, are going to be migrated to IAM in the future. And with IAM, you can do all of the things that you've been able to do in the past. You can do federation back to your on-prem external authentication methodology. So Active Directory, LDAP, whatever that you're going to connect to, you're going to use what's called a SAML2 provider on your on-prem side to be able to talk to the cloud and be able to use it. You can also do single sign-on with IDCS and IAM. When we get to the independent install, things become a little bit different. We're not using the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, IDCS or IAM. We're using one of two methods to do our security. If you're an old EPM customer and you used shared services, you can set up to use shared services with your with your Essbase independent install. You can also use Weblogic Security. Now, there are differences between the two of them. And let me explain and actually show you, and I'm going to do a screen share. This takes a couple seconds to pop up. Maybe it'll pop up for me to be able to show my screen. Let's try it again. I'm waiting for my screen share to show up. And it is being problematic. One more time. Start screen share. There it is. Okay. So if we go to and look at the workspace for a shared services implementation, I can log on, and you'll notice that all of the stuff isn't there that I normally see. If I am using this only for Essbase, this is what I'm going to see, and I'm going to navigate and administer shared services. Now, I'm going to have my typical stuff in here, my native directory and my external authentication directory, and I'm going to manage my users and manage my groups in here. So if I go ahead and I look at one of my users and I go into provisioning, all of my provisioning is going to be done in here. So I can come in here and I can give them access to the server the way that I typically do, and I can give them access to different applications at different levels. the way I do it today. So I can do all of this in shared services. I can manage my users and I can manage my groups in here. If I'm in shared services mode, when I go to Essbase, and this is a Windows version, not that it matters, and I log in, what you're going to see on the cards is there is no card for security. And that's because everything is being managed in shared services. At least the access to the server is managed there, and the users and groups are managed there. So the access to the server and what the access to the applications is. Now, once I have the users set up to be able to access an application, I still have to give them access to filters. So for example, here I have a really weird filter name, and I would come in here and I would grant them access to that filter or to a calc script. So the access to the server and access to the applications is all done through shared services security. The access to calc scripts and filters is done in the application. You'll also notice if I try and do things like look at the applications, I'm not going to get anything. That everything is, all of this is managed independently. I'm actually surprised that I was actually seeing this, because before it never used to come up. We did a patch and they must have fixed this one thing. But we're going to manage we're going to manage the users and groups in here. We're going to manage the access to the applications outside of here. If we're talking about the Weblogic Security, there is a difference. And with shared services security, I can have native users and native groups. I can have external users and external groups, and I can put external users in native groups. I can kind of mix them up. I can't put a native user in an external group, but I can do the opposite. With with Weblogic Security, I can't do that mixing. If I wanted to have external users, they also have to be in external groups. And so I'm going to actually log off of this one. If I can close my dialog boxes, there we go. So if I'm using Weblogic Security, first when I log on, what I'm going to see, let's try that again. Hang on a second. Let me reconnect to that one. There we go. So you'll notice that when I'm logging on, and by the way, this happens to be a web-based, an OCI version, but the security looks the same for them. So you'll notice that when I'm using Weblogic Security, I have a security card. And in here, what we do is we get a list of users and groups from my provider, and we add them into the service. Now, when we do so, we add them as either a service administrator, which means that they can do anything, a power user, which means that they have access to create their own applications, give security access to their own applications to other people, And they also have access to applications that are explicitly given to them. And then most of your users are going to be standard users, which only have access to applications that are explicitly given to them. So with Weblogic Security, you can have native users and native groups, and you can have native users within native groups. You can also have external users and external groups, but you can only have external users in external groups. I can't put native users in external groups or external users in native groups. That is the one limitation of Weblogic Security. Now, once you have the security set up at the server level, then you can go into an application and you can grant security to that application. And there's 4 levels of access that you can grant. You can grant application manager, which means that they have the ability to delete the application and make changes to the application settings. You have the database manager that can make changes to the database, to the outline. Application manager can also make all of those changes. And they could delete the database. Database update, if you want to give people access to run calc scripts, you have to give them database update access. And then if you just want to give them access or filtered access, you give them database access. And then just like with the other security, once we do that, then we can go into filters and we can give them access to filters. So it all kind of works the same way. So there really is a lot that happens with security, and there's big differences between independent and on OCI. So there is a question here about Essbase 21c with on-prem planning. And the answer is that if you upgrade to EPM 11.2.8 is the earliest version, then you can actually use Essbase 21c with planning. It is being supported in that version. Not all the feature functionality of 21c works with planning, but you can install a 21c environment with 11.2.8. So as we move on a little bit, talking about more of the features and functionality, there are differences between the independent install and with the OCI marketplace install. So just for fun, there are 5 differences on this screen. I'll give you a second to show them. And then at the end, I'll actually show you what the differences are, so you can be looking for the differences instead of listening to me. So with an independent install with either Windows or Linux, there is the ability to use what is called EAS Lite. And it is meant to be a interim helping conversion tool to get you comfortable with migrating from 11G, Essbase, 11.124 or whatever your version is, up to 21C. It is really meant to be a short-term solution, and they would really prefer you to use the web interface or what is called Cube Designer to do your upgrades. As I mentioned before, the second difference is on the independent install is that you use either Weblogic Security or Shared Services Security. In the Marketplace install, you're going to use IDCS or IAM. And I know I'm talking a lot of acronyms, and I apologize. In the independent install, you can also do clustering and failover and high availability and a few other things like that. That's not yet available on Marketplace. There is a feature that is only available in Marketplace, and I actually have to change my headset. Hang on just one second. And hopefully you can still hear me. So in Marketplace installs, you have the ability to use what are called federated partitions. And what a federated partition is if you've installed Essbase using an Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse as your database repository, then you can create a link to that have no data in them. The data in them is retrieved from the Autonomous Data Warehouse when you actually ask for the data in Essbase. It issues a SQL query and goes back and gets that data. Now we're in version 1 of that, and there are a lot of enhancements coming with it. So don't expect a lot from the version that they have out now. It has a lot of limitations, but they're working feverishly to expand the functionality of that. But let's talk about the independent install and EAS Lite for just a minute. Let me see if I can share again. Come on, bring me the share screen. For some reason, it doesn't like me to screen share. Come on. It's being problematic. There it goes. Okay, so if we look at EAS Lite will do things that EAS will, but it is a subset of functionality. You'll notice that there's only one cube showing up in my EAS Lite, and this is connected to my Windows version here. So you'll notice here I have a whole bunch of cubes out here, but only one of them has a little EAS next to it. Make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So this is the only one that is managed in EAS Lite. In order to get an application to be managed in EAS Lite, I have to come over and I have to inspect it and go to settings and then turn on this managed by Essbase Administration Services. And I can do this once. If I turn it on and then I turn it off, I can't go back, because when I turn it off, what it does is it updates the outline into a new format that the web interface uses. If I actually go in and inspect a database, the outline from an EAS managed application, it's going to be in a view-only mode because it is not allowed to be edited in the web interface, because it would add new features and functionality that EAS Lite does not have in it. So it really is meant to be an interim solution. So you can see here, I have this view only. So I can't edit it here. So So I'm going to go ahead and close this. If I opened up a different outline that's not managed, and I've got something in my way, so I'm going to have to do it that way. You'll see that I have the ability to manage an outline here. And the outline editor for here has gotten really good. They've made a lot of features and functionality in here that make your life better. So you can see here, if I edit the outline, I can bring up a panel on this side that allows me to edit all the things without having to get off of the member. I can also, you have all of these tabs across the top. I can actually go in and I can add columns that I want and move them. And so now I can alter the way that I'm seeing the display. I can do things like I can automatically, if I wanted to turn this cube into a hybrid cube, I could take something like this market dimension, right mouse click on it and say set all of this hierarchy to dynamic, or I can turn it back off using either the buttons at the top. The one thing I cannot do in the web editor that I can do in EAS Lite is I cannot open up and paste between them. That is coming toward the end of the year, but it is not here yet. So EAS Lite really is meant to be an interim solution. There are a couple of bugs with partitions, so they actually work better in EAS Lite than but almost anything that you can do in EAS Lite, you can do in the web UI. So let me stop sharing again, go back to my presentation. And for those of you who have been trying to follow along, here are the differences between the two slides. So the ability. So there's a ton of things that have changed in 21c. One of the biggest changes is in rules files. And they've made rules files much better in 21c. So again, I'm going to try and share my screen again. Try one more time. Come on, third time's the charm maybe. I'm waiting for this little thing to pop up that shows me my screen, and I'm not seeing it. This is oh, there it goes. This is a new interface for me. I'm not used to using this Elite Studio, so forgive me for my foibles here. So if we're looking at 21c, first I want to talk about data sources. And it deals with load rules and with other things as well. So I can create a connection here, and I've got all of these different connections. This one is happening to talk to an Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse. And I can create connections to different things. And if we look, I can create a connection to Oracle databases, to Essbase, to a file, to a Spark DB, DB2, SQL Server, or any JDBC compliant data source. And with those connections, what I can do is I can actually create a SQL statement or a connection that's going to bring me back data. And it can be from a So what I do is I create a connection here, and I think it's ADW that I need. And I can create my SQL if I can remember it. I think that's it. If this works, I'll be amazed. Oh. See, I have to remember the name of my databases or my columns. Okay, so this one would be a dimension build that has all of the information about my market dimension. So previewing this, it should pop up in a second. This is the first time I'm connecting to it, so it had to make the connection. So you can see it gave me all of this information about my market dimension. And I can use this in a dimension build rule. I can also use these in data load rules. So I'm not going to save this. I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out. But I can use different ways of doing this in order to get data. So now if I go to an application like Sample Basic, if I inspect the database, I have the ability to create scripts. And one type of script I can create is a load rule. And there are 3 different types of load rules I can create. I can create a data load rule, I can create a dimension build index-based, and a dimension build regular. I'm going to show you the index-based because this is kind of new I don't want to say 21c because it was actually over there in OAC Essbase, but it is kind of a nice thing. So if you were on OAC, you used to have to wait and to be able to get your data. I'm actually going to go ahead and get this from a file, and I'm going to use that market data. And I'm going to give this a name, my favorite name. Now, what's really nice about this is that I can actually preview the data before I bring it into the rule to make sure that I've got my delimiters and everything else set up, and this looks just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the rule, and it'll pop up in a second. And what I really like about this editor is the fact that I can come in here and I know this is my market dimension, and I can do changes in here without having to go to other screens. So I know this is the parent-child build rule, so I can come in here and I say this is the parent and this is the child, and this happens to be the default alias, so I can come in here and start typing alias. And what alias table am I using? I'm using the default alias table, and I know this happens to be a UDA, so I can type in here UDA. And this happens to be another UDA. Yeah, that's another UDA, so I'm going to go ahead and type that in. And then you'll notice all of these. Well, in a regular load rule, I can only have one alias per one dimension build rule, I should say. One alias name per load rule. Now I can have multiples. And I can bring in all of my different aliases here. So that was Chinese, this is Japanese. This is going to be Russian. This one is German. And then this happens to be an attribute dimension. And what attribute dimension is it? Well, it happens to be population. So I can build all of these things in one load rule very easily. But the reason why they call it an index-based load rule is that it gives me another capability. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to create a new column. And I'm going to create it with an expression. So it's going to bring it up. And notice I now have this join and the substring. So I'm going to click on join. And what I want to join is my very first column with my column 3. And I want to put a dash in there. So I can just click on this and then say comma, put a dash in there, comma, and then I said I wanted to do column 3. And now if I preview that, you'll notice that it created it for me. So what it allowed me to do was take non-contiguous columns and make them into a new column. If I say OK, it's going to show up where I had told it to put it. So this is a really nice feature. It makes it so we don't have to split columns and move them around and all of that stuff. It made it very easy. So I could also, you'll notice I could also do substringing in here. Maybe I want just the first character of column 1. So substring column 1. Comma 1, comma, I think it's 1. See if that works. Yep. So I can also do substringing if I just want part of a column. So it makes it really nice and easy to do that. Now this only works in index-based load rules, and it only works on dimension building rules. If you wanted to concatenate columns in a data load, you still have to do it the old way. The other advantage of a index-based load rule is this. So if I click on the market dimension, if you know from an old load rule in 11G, you had 2 options on the rule. You could merge and you could remove unspecified. Now we have a new option in here that's called reset dimension. And what reset dimension does is it deletes all of the members in the dimension and then re-adds them from the load rule. So if you have a lot of shared hierarchies where items move around a lot, we used to have to go in and do weird things like create a dummy load rule that just remove, that did a remove only, or remove unspecified, I should say, and kept the one member, and then a second rule that would re-add all of the members in so we could move the shared members. Now I don't have to do that. I can do it in the one load rule. So it makes my life much, much easier. So this is another feature that's only in index-based load rules. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is there's no cancel button up here. If I don't want to save it, I basically have to come in here and just delete it off of my tabs, and that's okay. They've done a number of improvements to the data load rules as well. So very quickly, again, we get here, have to give it a name, and I'm going to go ahead and find a file that I can do, I think that one. So let me preview and see if this is good. And so this one is not a comma delimited file. This is space delimited. So we'll change the delimiter. And that looks much better. And I need to skip 2 rows because this was actually a column level export. So I needed to know that. So now I'm just going to go ahead and proceed. Now in the data load, they've made it easier for us to select things. So if I click on the little pencil, I get all of my dimensions. I actually get a preview over here, so I know that this is my year dimension. If I click on next, this is my scenario. Next, this is what is that? Weird. Okay. This was a bad example, but say this is my product. It really isn't, but, and this is my market, and this is my scenario. Notice I had skipped measures. So now I could come in here and say, well, this is my sales. And you'll notice that it knew that this was numeric, so they said that it's a data field. And I now have this option that I now can get the minimum value, the maximum value, the sum of everything, or the count of them for the intersections in order to load that in. If this were my only data column, then I would click on this and it would give me a star data star in order to be able to load it. So I'm not going to continue on with this, but you can see how it had filled in the items. So it makes it much nicer to be able to do with this. I still have field properties, that I can come in here and I can do my rejection and my selection criteria, my replacements, all of that stuff, just like I could in an old load rule. So I get all of the feature functionality that I wanted. So I'm going to stop sharing on this, go back and see if there were any questions that you had. Oops, I have to go to the right tab. Hang on just a second. And so let's keep talking about more things. So what are some of the other enhancements that are in 21c? So there are a lot of other things that are available. For example, in the cloud version, there is the ability to use an external source for using filters. Essbase drill through is built into the product now. You no longer need to use Essbase Studio. There are a lot of things that are available. I actually am rushing through this because I spent a lot of time and I've only got a few minutes left and I want to get to your questions. But there are a ton of enhancements that they've been doing. One of the big enhancements is to the hybrid engine. And they've made the hybrid engine more functional. It will do more, it's what we call the second generation hybrid engine. It's able to handle more complex outlines and more complex situations and is much faster. We get the ability to use runtime substitution variables in calc scripts, similar to what they do in planning in Calc Manager, where you can pass parameters into a calc script. We can now do it in our native Essbase calc scripts, a whole bunch of other things. But I don't want to talk about just what they've already done. I also want to talk about what's the future, what's coming up in the next versions of Essbase. So there was supposed to have been a patch out, 21.4, that was supposed to come out in the July or August timeframe. That's actually been pushed back into the September timeframe. And what they've done is they've actually patented a new hybrid dependency for ASO. So ASO and hybrid will use the same type of dependency analysis that is much, much faster. It can do the analysis based on a whole block of data instead of doing it on individual rows at a time. So we're speeding up the capabilities of both hybrid and ASO retrievals. For all of 21C, we can use REST API calls. And REST API calls are the ability to get and manage the entire system using commands instead of using the UI. As a matter of fact, the whole Essbase 21c was built using REST API calls. Everything they do is a REST API call. Well, there's a new REST API call coming out in 21.4 that's going to allow you to create drill-through reports for doing drill-through using the REST API call. So you don't have to use SmartView and Excel to do it. You can actually do it with a REST API call. They're improving the audit capabilities. Right now, the auditing allows you to see what users have been logged onto the system and do auditing on what changes have been made to data through SmartView. The new auditing is going to allow you to pick and choose what you want to audit. So, for example, by application, you can see what users have logged on, what calculations that they've run, what load rules they've run, what changes they've made, all of that. The next enhancement, and it's coming through at the end of the year, is that they're going to have parity with EAS on outline editing. So you'll be able to bring up two outlines in the web-based interface and do cutting and pasting between them. So that is pretty cool. That's coming the end of the year. Oh, I just went to full screen. There's new enhancements for Marketplace that are coming up. One of them that I chided them on was that Oracle Cloud Infrastructure changed new implementations from IDCS to IAM. They actually didn't tell the Essbase group, and so the documentation still refers to IDCS. We had to figure out how to do it and went back to development and said, hey, we got a problem here. So they fixed that. They've also set up a new autonomous data warehouse private endpoint to make it easier to connect. They're going to allow you to store objects on the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Object Store, which is a lower cost storage facility, and it's also, you can have bigger areas on that. Right now, you can do things that are currently in the shared and the user files and things like backups. They're planning on doing application and other artifacts later. One of the really cool features is if you have to do an out-of-place upgrade. For example, the upgrade from 19C to 21C is an out-of-place upgrade. You have to build a new 21C instance and migrate all of your artifacts. Well, at the end of the year, it's basically going to be a one-button push that you can say, migrate all of my stuff for me, and it will automatically do that move of everything from 19C to 21C, and then you just have to upgrade your automation scripts and other things to point to the new instance, that type of thing. They're adding failover support, and they're also adding improvements to the federated partitions for calculation support and the ability to push calculations down the autonomous data warehouse. So as I said, currently federated partitions on OCI are limited. It's, phase 1, and so they're making it more better in my terms. So those are the things that are coming up that I know about in the near future. And I have to say for the last 2 slides, safe harbor applies. Things get changed and slipped. So let me go ahead and try and get to some of your questions now. So the question is, can you install 21C on-prem? If so, can you install in a container in AWS? And the answer is yes, you would have to do an independent install. And yes, you can install it in a container. You can install it anywhere you want, AWS, Azure, your own on-prem data center. And if you actually Google things, you can find a presentation by Jason Jones from Applied OLAP that talks about creating a Docker install for it. The next question is, I may have answered this, but what is the path for 11.2.8 on-prem, 19 or 21? Is it an out of place or an in place? So if you want to install from 11.1.2.4 to 11.2.8 EPM, first you have to make sure you're licensed for 11.2.8, but it is an out of place upgrade. You have to install new servers and migrate everything from 11.1.2.4. Now, when you install EPM 11.2.8, you have 2 options. You can install it with the 11.1.2.4 Essbase, or you can install it with the 21C Essbase. Hopefully that answered that question. Can you still use SQL as a data source? If so, what database sources are supported? Can you load data using API calls? So the answer is you can use SQL data sources in load rules. It will support any ODBC, JDBC compliant source. You may have to install the ODBC on your Essbase server in order for you to do that. And yes, you can still use Java API calls or REST API calls in order to do your dimension building and data loading. Is the upgrade from 19C to 21C complicated? It really isn't complicated. As a matter of fact, it's actually pretty easy because you're going to basically stand up a new confidential application with 21C. You're going to be able to migrate all of your security because it's going to use the same IDCS or IAM that you had on 19C. And then you're just going to have to migrate your applications to the new environment. So it really isn't complicated at all. What are the fundamental differences between Oracle Analytics Cloud and Essbase? What do you suggest a customer to choose from and why? Well, Oracle Analytics Cloud Essbase is dead. They haven't made any updates to it in a couple of years. They've deprecated it. The only people who are still on it are ones that have contracts that have not expired. And when they do expire, they're going to have to move to 21C. So OAC Essbase has a lot of limited functionality that both 19C and 21C have improved upon. The way load rules work, the way the outline editor works, the ability to even copy and rename applications and databases. OAC was just limited. So you're not going to have the ability to use OAC anymore. Is there a one-pager that shows what is available on cloud versus what on-prem? And I don't know that there is. I know one of our salespeople is putting something together. So if you reach out to your InterRel sales rep or Argano InterRel sales rep, they can get you what that difference is. Have I done an integration of Essbase with SAP for HANA? And I have not, I'm afraid. So that was actually, I think, the last question. So I do thank you for being here. If you do run into any other questions, feel free to email me at glenn.schwartzberg@argano.com or info@argano.com, and we will get back to you with an answer. I love talking about Essbase, so I'm more than happy to talk about it anytime. With that, I'm 1 minute over, which is fantastic for me. I'm normally like 20 minutes. So have a great day, everybody, and enjoy your Essbase.